Welcome to the Croydon Constitutionalist Pubcast, episode number 10. Today we are socially distancing and sitting in our homes, so this is a virtual pubcast. But first of all, Dan, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a bottle of Shipyard IPA, a beer that I'm very, very fond of. That is readily available in many Wetherspoons establishments, but obviously I'm not in a Wetherspoons establishment. But fortunately I've found it in my local co-op, so highly recommend it.
Fantastic. I'm keeping back some beers for later in the week with less shopping going on at the moment. So I'm currently on a vodka and Coke. Smirnoff, I believe, is the brand. Okay, so today we were due to, around this time, at the time of recording, have an event on the future of the BBC. We're going to have some great guest speakers. Unfortunately, of course, that's been postponed due to the COVID-19 crisis. We hope to come back to you soon with some new dates, and obviously we hope to be able to hit those dates. But we wanted to talk a bit about the BBC. So in the last week, Emily Maitlis has been on Newsnight preaching her political views for a supposedly neutral broadcaster. The BBC managed to run a story and then apologise about a boss of an NHS trust who had to contact them because they were so concerned about getting gowns and PPE, saying they needed phone numbers for Burberry. Turns out, of course, to be a complete fabrication. BBC just didn't bother checking who this person was. They managed to run a story about a nurse who was very worried about her, or a child was very worried about the lack of PPE. Turns out this nurse has met Jeremy Corbyn, was pleased that Boris went into the ICU, and had in fact been involved in giving away some PPE because they had surplus stuff. The BBC had an expert GP on. They did mention he'd been a former MP, didn't mention it was a Labour MP, didn't mention he was a current candidate for Labour. And they had another nurse on complaining about the lack of PPE, who is, according to their Twitter profile, or their tweets, a socialist, a Unite activist, anti-Brexit, anti-Israel, calls the British Army imperialist forces and believes in fights the Tories hard. At this backdrop, Dan, does the BBC even have a future?
Well, obviously, we were looking to discuss the future of the BBC pre the COVID crisis. Our concerns about the BBC are: does it really fit in this day and age? You've got streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime and others, where you can choose whether you want to pay for them, and they're all cheaper than the BBC license fee, which you are forced to pay. We've had some concerns about bias in the BBC, particularly in regard to the Brexit debate and what's happened since the referendum and right up until the December 2019 general election and the Tory result and the Tory victory, and obviously Boris getting Brexit at least notionally across the line at the end of January. So against that backdrop, we now see this, frankly, lack of journalistic credibility, really. So often we're told that the BBC is a bastion of impartiality, and it's the sort of, even if it's whether it's a website or the news broadcasts, it's a trusted body. You can trust the news from the BBC, whereas perhaps on various websites you can't trust that news. It's fake news. It's conspiracy theory or somehow politicised. Well, if the BBC wants to be considered impartial in its news broadcasting, it really does need to do its background research. They have the money, they have the resources to do this research, and frankly, a couple of clicks on the internet would have found out who these people are. But if we're expected to fork out every month or every year, depending on how you pay for it, against our will, to pay for BBC News, and they have what I would say are real journalists who are doing the broadcasting and the research and providing us with this news, the least they could do is their research. But in terms of the impartiality, there's certainly some questions have to be asked about some of the actual presenters. You mentioned Emily Maitlis, who does not seem to care for impartiality whatsoever. Given that's a bedrock of the BBC, I mean, it's actually the bedrock of any British organisation, but certainly the BBC. What we've seen in the last few weeks, and indeed the years previously when it came to particularly Brexit, real concerns. And I'm not so sure that people are going to be happy to be paying out their money against their will, with the threat of fines and even imprisonment, when we're getting such shoddy and partial journalism.
So you mentioned there about a Google of people. Now I know, and I'll let some people in here. We various political things we've run, people have come and contacted us, be they press or people that want to get involved. And what's the first thing we do when we get someone new on board who's got a bit of a high profile? So not necessarily everyone, but certainly anyone with a high profile. We Google them, we find out about them, we find out who they are. Particularly if they're selling a good story, because guess what? Sometimes a story's too good to be true, and you just want to make sure they're not something funny about them. And we found some interesting characters in the past, and generally we found some completely normal people, and they've got a good, just want to come and help us out. But that's, absolutely the norm these days, that you would Google someone, you'd look them up on LinkedIn if you're coming for an interview at your job. Before you do that, it is astounding to me that highly paid journalists at the BBC, or frankly even lowly paid journalists at the BBC, can't even do that basic check.
No, it's just shocking. I mean, anybody can do this, or whether it be people's Twitter accounts or what have you. It's basic journalism. And these people have apparently are trained journalists, but they seem incapable of doing this research, or else they're too lazy to do it, or else they actually know what the background of these people are, and they don't care. But again, you'd think the BBC, which is the government's running a consultation, or the consultation has just finished on decriminalising the non-payment of the TV license. You'd think the BBC would be on their best behaviour at the moment. Instead, what we've heard is that they've been coming up with a suggestion, which would be to perhaps do away with the TV license. But you know what? You don't have to pay for your TV license, but you do have to pay to have the internet. So that seems to be the suggestion if the government does look to remove the TV license. I think we're just losing all faith in the BBC at the moment. But hey, we've got the NHS is a beloved organisation that's proving its worth quite a bit at the moment. Obviously, the BBC had an opportunity to do that. It seems to be blowing it at the moment.
Completely. It's interesting I find that, being through, what are we now, into week 4 of this, I've got Amazon Prime, I've got Netflix, I've got, obviously, YouTube's available. I've not watched the telly. I've not watched the normal TV programs. I will catch up periodically on the press briefings. And sometimes that might be a BBC feed. It's sometimes other people. It's whoever comes up top of YouTube, to be honest. I don't feel any need to engage with a BBC service at the moment. I wouldn't dream of listening to their radio. I would listen to talk radio or LBC, often on the background if I'm not listening to a podcast. Pretty hard for me, and I'm, we're both sort of halfway between that age group that's all online and kind of has very little connections to the BBC, and the age group that's very much with the BBC, and certainly I grew up with it. I don't feel any connection or any need to use their service anymore.
No, there are alternative services, for whether it be for news or entertainment. Some are free, some cost money, but they are they're equally as good and often half the price. So and indeed you have the choice to purchase them, and it's quite possible that in years to come, those people who are used to paying for your likes of Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., where they've made that choice to do that, those consumers that they will turn against the BBC. Obviously thinking of younger people now, who are perhaps yet to actually purchase a TV license, perhaps because they're still living at home, or are students or something like that. But yeah, I'm not sure the future for the BBC is looking bright at the moment now.
No, indeed. And you mentioned about purchasing there. I believe both Netflix and Amazon are cheaper than the license fee. And I'll stand corrected because I can't quite remember what they are. But the like all good discussions down a pub, we don't have the details to hand. Obviously, Amazon also gets me free delivery on my Amazon purchases. So why do I want to pay for a third service I don't use? Can't see the purpose on it.
No, I think the BBC could be in real trouble at the moment.
And I do want to say that lots of people love it. Fantastic, buy it. More than happy for you to support that. NPR works on that model in the States. It works perfectly well. If you like the service, you pay for it. If you don't like the service, you're not forced to. Much better way forward.
Indeed. Well, it's been lovely having a virtual podcast, but we've got another virtual meetup, so people can actually join us virtually, as it were, and indeed they can have a drink. Mike, why don't you tell everybody about the next virtual catch up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already held one, really, really enjoyable evening. Come along and enjoy our virtual pub. Thursday, the 30th of April, between 7:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. Join at any point during those times you want. It's on GoToMeet. The URL is on our website. It's www.gotomeet.me/Croydon Constitutionalists. I'd suggest have a look at our website or get in touch. Join us again Thursday, 30th of April, between 7:30 and 10 p.m. and we get to have an enjoyable chat, a few drinks, and put the world to rights.
Excellent. The last virtual meetup was great, and I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dan, and everyone keep well.
Cheers.